Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So, guys, apparently nothing can stop what is coming, or so Russian politicians are saying on media briefs. So, what we're going to talk about today, guys, I'm going to briefly touch on the Trump and Biden debate because it was quite funny. I'm going to give, more about what Russian politicians are saying about World War III already started. We're going to talk about Poland and the Baltic states wanting a defensive line on their eastern border with Russia. I'm going to talk about the Wikipedia update on World War III and why that's actually important. And I'm going to talk about the final bridge of diplomacy between the East and the West is about to be blown. So guys, let's just get into it. And guys, if you've not done so already, please hit those likes and subscribe buttons. It really helps me out when you do that. So obviously the Trump-Biden debate, it went as everybody thought it would. On one hand, you've got, a senile old man, and I don't mean Trump, who struggles to get words out. And then you've got Trump, who's so sharp and witty, you would struggle. Russell Brand would struggle to debate with Trump. So you see that it's, what was always going to happen, happened. But what I want to read quickly to you guys is how the media are reporting on this and how we're seeing the, the eyes of the media and the perception of the media change. Because once the perception of the media changes, the perception of the population changes. So, quickly guys, okay, this is from Politico. I like Politico. I'm just going to read you a snippet. Enormous lies by Trump, one Western diplomat said. On the other hand, at least we understood what he says. Maybe we are witnessing a turning point for Biden. Some of it was about expectations. International officials and diplomats were ready for Trump to sprout falsehood. But, this is funny, but Biden, they had hoped, would present a stronger, more vigorous, by the end of the debate, some were questioning whether he was fit to lead at all. So guys, it doesn't look good for poor Joe Biden. And I mean this, this as a human being. He shouldn't be there. He's been exploited. He needs to go with his family, probably not Hunter. He needs to go with his family. He needs to go into care, and he needs to be looked after. And in the last days of his, in the last days or years, whatever he's got left, he just needs to be around his family, and he needs to feel loved. He shouldn't be there. It's unfair on him. It's unfair on his family. And more importantly, it's unfair on the voters in America. Because, guys, looks like we're having Trump as the next president. I don't see any other way around this, guys. Remember what I've been saying for the longest time about this diversions now. Trump's going to come in. He said he's going to settle I can't remember the exact words, but he's going to basically settle the war in Ukraine, but guys, be under no illusion. There's the next front that will open up will be in the Middle East, and America will lead that, and then that's going to leave the UK, Europe to fight the war in Ukraine. And that's how it's going to go, guys. These countries, the United Kingdom, the United States, everybody, they've learned over the past years not to overextend themselves. Iraq, Afghanistan, America overextended itself. If they'd have just chose one and let their allies deal with the other, things may have been different. But the reality is now, I think they've learnt their lessons, and that's why you're seeing this fake diversions, and that's where the things are going to go, and they're the directions things are going to move forwards to in the future. So more Russian politicians now are coming out and saying that we're already in World War III. They're claiming that we're in the 5th phase of this world war. I don't know what the first 4 phases are. I've no idea, but that's what they're claiming. Now, obviously, I'll put the links to this in the description. The reason I'm bringing this to you guys, the reason I'm bringing it out and I'm sharing it, is because what I want to do is I want to give you guys as much perspective from the Russian side of things. Whether, nobody forced Putin to send his tanks into Ukraine. I don't accept the argument of provocation. It's ridiculous. Nobody pushed those tanks over the border. But what you've got now is you've got Russian mainstream media pumping this thing, all this propaganda out now to their, to their population, and that will have an effect on perception. And remember, the truth doesn't really matter. All that happens is the perception of the truth. So while you're going to have lots of people who wouldn't really take notice of this stuff, normal everyday Russians, they'll be watching this, and they'll be, this will be having a mass drive on recruitment. It'll be having a mass drive on productivity. It'll be having a mass drive in patriotism. And let's not forget, the Russians are now updating their nuclear doctrine. They're giving new updates onto how they can fire those weapons. I don't think we're going to see strategic nuclear weapons. I think we're going to very soon see the use of I just feel tactical nuclear weapons are going to be used. It could be the case that a dirty bomb gets used, so not a nuclear device, but a device that sends out radioactive. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not fallout, but basically you get a load of fissionable material, nuclear waste usually, lots of nuclear waste in Ukraine. You get one of those, you pack it around a conventional explosive, and then you detonate it. Then the whole area is radiated. You've got a nuclear, you've got a nuclear zone, but you're not using you're not using the force of nuclear power. Now, I think that could come first, but I do think we're going to see the use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield. Remember, guys, okay, United States, NATO, they've already planned for this. Go and look at, what's it called, Honest John rockets or missiles, whatever. These were basically a nuclear weapon that they were going to give commanding officers. So if you're a commanding officer of a battalion, you get your 3 rifle companies, you get your support weapons, you get your HQ element, and you also get your nuclear weapons. Can you imagine the carnage this would cause? Also, let's keep a wide spectrum of view. We've got NATO right now taking out their nuclear weapons, dusting them off, refurbishing them, and making them putting them into deployable delivery systems. And that's happening. The Russians know it's happening. Everybody knows what's coming, guys. All right. What else have we got? Yeah, so Poland and the Baltic states, they're asking for a wall to be built to protect their eastern front. Let me just read quickly, because it's kind of segues into what I've been talking about. This one. So Poland and the Baltic states, so Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, have demanded that the European Union strengthens its eastern border, warning of the looming threat from Russia and Belarus along its 1,500-mile border with the east. The 4 EU member states are staunch allies of Ukraine, which has been fighting a fully fledged Russian invasion for more than 2 years. Here's the bit, guys. They are critics of Moscow, who they accuse of orchestrating hybrid attacks. So remember what we've said, guys, for the longest time about these criminal gangs, including intimidation, instrumentalization of migrants, so the weaponization of migrants, so pushing migrants into a certain area and telling them to act a certain way. Sabotage. Remember, guys, all right, I've been saying this, and I've been saying this before anybody else has come out on it. So in a few months' time, there'll be a lot of bigger channels and they'll be copying my stuff, and they'll all be saying the same sort of stuff. But guys, remember, you heard it here first. Sabotage, disinformation, foreign information manipulation and interference. Well, you can do that anyway in cyber attacks. But the main ones here, guys, the main keywords to take away from this are migrants and sabotage. I've said it for the longest time. You can move, people, whoever it is, they can then be criminal gangs. You can move them into a country. You can say, right, you know what? I want you 10 people or however many it is. Whenever you feel like it, I want you to go and destroy water facilities. I want you to prioritize pumps. I want you to prioritize pipes. And I want you to prioritize, filtration systems. Right, that's what those 10 do. And every time you do one of these sabotage events, I will pay you X amount of euros. And then guess what? You have a team then who are using sabotage as an industrial, as a commercial product then. You're commercializing sabotage. And then, you know, in time, people will just think, right, if I can earn some money out of this, I'm going to go and do it with the cost of living crisis building up. It's absolutely insane. Remember what we spoke about yesterday, guys, the food supply in the UK. We've got criminal gangs from Eastern Europe stealing GPS units, and I think this is only the tip of the iceberg. I think this is only the very smallest amount of what's actually happening. You know, if we look into it, and I think I'm pretty confident that there's not a media blackout, but yeah, I guess a media blackout on this situation, because people don't want to be afraid. People want to think that we have food security, and guys, we really don't have food security, especially not in the UK. How do I know this? Because we import more than we grow. So that's the reality of the situation. If our imports stop coming in, guess what? We're not having enough food. And again, you know, the two things I say here, guys, okay? I say we're going to have food shortages in the UK, which we are, but I don't think we're going to have, I don't think anybody's going to starve. I don't think we're going to have famine here, because we will have, I feel we will have the bare minimum, the raw ingredients, you know, your staple foods. Whereas a lot of countries, a lot of people in poorer countries, they just won't have this because they don't have the finances to be able to pay for these products. So Wikipedia was updated last night to include a lot more stuff about World War III. Why is this relevant? Why is it important? Because you guys, people are now searching for it. People have got more of an interest in it. If you look on Google Trends, it comes up quite often. World War III, Ukraine, will there be a third world war? And all these sort of stuff, you know, it's pumping up there because people in the, you know, the general public now are starting to worry about this. So let me just quickly read something from, where am I? So I'll put the link into the description, guys, but I don't know if this was in before. Let me just, so I've spoke about this before, but after the Second World War, Winston Churchill wanted to attack Russia. Gotta love that guy, you know. Winston Churchill wanted to attack Russia. He wanted to reformat the German army and say, right, Germans, you're actually all right. You're with us now. We're all going to go and fight the Russians. Can you imagine that, guys? Can you imagine you've just fought a war from 1939, I mean, you could argue 1936, but let's just go, you've just fought a war for 5 years. The biggest war, the most technological war the world has ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of people, you know, not coming back to their families. And then all of a sudden, you know, Winston's just having he's gonna have a little change around, and we're gonna go and fight those guys now. Guys, you know, think what you want to him. He was bold. But anyway, guys, I'm going to read you what it says here, guys. So this was called Operation Unthinkable. British Prime Minister was concerned that with the enormous size of the Soviet Red Army, forces deployed in Central and Eastern Europe at the end of World War II, and the unreliability of the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, there was a serious threat to Western Europe. Now, let me interject here, guys, right? I've spent a lot of time all over the world, and I've spent a lot of time in Ukraine. And some of the stories I've heard are from grandparents who were little children around the Second World War time. They're terrifying on how the Russians treat people back then, and how the Russians how they acted with their prisoners, what they did to them, you know, and this sort of stuff, you know, it's absolutely terrifying. So you've got to put this into the context that at the time Winston Churchill would have known this. He would have known about these atrocities that actually happened. In April-May 1945, the British Armed Forces developed Operation Unthinkable, thought to be the first scenario of the Third World War. Guys, it doesn't look too different today, does it? Like 60, 80 years on or whatever it is. It does not look too different at the moment. You know, it really looks like we've just, you know, we just skipped a few generations, and it looks like Operation Unthinkable is about to happen. its primary goal was to impose upon Russia the will of the United States and the British Empire. I'll come back to that. The plan was rejected by the British Chiefs of Staff Committee as militarily unfeasible. Guys, do we still have an empire in Britain? Call me an old patriot, but I see, I see a path where if we're smart as a country, we can use the resources in Antarctica, the vast amounts of oil, the vast amounts of natural resources, and we could rebuild a new, better British Empire. The only problem I see is that we have absolute buffoons running the country. Remember yesterday's video, I spoke about these honey traps. People, our politicians, are getting WhatsApp messages from whoever, and they're sending compromising pictures of themselves to random numbers that have just sent them a WhatsApp. Guys, how does this even work? Are they really that stupid? I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are our diplomats really, are our political class really that stupid? Remember, guys, I wanted to be part of that political class myself. I resigned. I said, look, guys, right now in my career, it's not something I want to do. I'm good. I don't want to be involved with this team at the moment. I'm gonna tap out for now. But anyway, guys, I don't know what the future holds, but it's certainly the way the political class that we've got at the moment. It's just full-scale buffoonery, in my opinion. Now, the final bridge of diplomacy is about to be blown, and once this is blown, you can't rebuild it. So what do I mean? So let me just read. I'll read you now, guys, from the. I'll put the links into the description. So, Russia is considering a possible downgrading of relations with the West due to deeper involvement of the US and its allies in the Ukraine war. Well, I don't know how further down they could degrade them. That's kind of like, fluff, and it doesn't really get to the weeds. But no decision had yet been taken. The Kremlin said on Thursday, so yesterday, a downgrading of relations or even breaking them off would illustrate the gravity of confrontation between Russia and the West over Ukraine after an escalation in tensions over the war in recent months. So what they mean here, guys, by breaking them off, they mean not talking to each other. And that is that's kind of like your last hope for peace, because as long as you've got people behind the scenes talking, so of course Vladimir Putin's not going to talk to Joe Biden or Donald Trump, but Vladimir Putin, he'll probably have an aide, Vasnia or Vova or whatever, and he talks to Rick or Tom. And these two, behind the scenes, they're coming to negotiations, then they talk to Trump, and then he talks to, Putin. So there's some back channels. Once that goes away, you can't rebuild that. Why? Because, I think there's an, what's his name? There's a guy's name, I'll try and, if I can find it, I'll put it in the description. But there's basically, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was two people, one in the United States, obviously, and one in Russia, and they had constant communications all through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they were talking to, they were friends, they were talking to each other. If you don't have that, so say these two guys start talking to each other, and they're friends, and they build a rapport, and they build trust. If those guys stop talking to each other, their friendship goes, these guys move positions. They can't just start talking again. It doesn't work like that. These relationships of trust, they're built over years. I trust, I give you, you take, I give. So you can't just rebuild these, you can't just rebuild these back channels with a wave of a magic wand. It doesn't work like that. And if these, these lines of communication fail, then each country will perceive or presume the worst, and they have to. For example, if America decides to do an ICBM test and there's no lines of communication, the Russians don't know that this thing was scheduled, and the ICBM goes off, intercontinental ballistic missile, basically a long missile that can hit another country. if the Russians don't know this is happening because there's no back channels and there's no communication, when that missile goes up, they go on alert and they're watching that missile. And once that missile goes up, depending on which way that turns, they'll have to make a decision. If it turns, well, I suppose it'll go over the Antarctic. Over the Arctic. But you see where I'm going with this, guys, all right? If the communications have failed, then each side, east and west, they always have to presume the worst because they want to minimize the damage to their own countries. So, guys, that is the peril that we're in today. Guys, it's been a short one today. I'm going to mag to grid and I'll see you later.